Welcome to the deep dive. Today, well, we've got quite a mission ahead of us.
We certainly do.
We're trying to connect the dots, basically, linking up the highest levels of global strategy, looking at how the whole geopolitical landscape is shifting, and then bringing it right down to the foundational military doctrine that makes it all actually happen on the ground.
Yeah, it's not just about flipping through some documents.
Exactly. It's about understanding the logic,
Yeah.
right? How the United States is planning to compete with major powers and, manage a future that looks increasingly chaotic and fragmented.
And we are pulling together some really dense, really critical sources today. We've got the 2022 National Defense Strategy,
The core document.
right? And the companion pieces, the Nuclear Posture Review and the Missile Defense Review. Then there's the big look ahead from the National Intelligence Council, Global Trends 2040.
That one paints quite a picture.
It does. And also, that very detailed study on Europe, dealing with the drag in China as a transatlantic challenge, and crucially, the framework for it all. Joint Publication 1, Volume 2, that's the bedrock of military command structure.
So the goal, our mission for this deep dive, is to take all these pieces and figure out the why. Why has the Department of Defense made these choices? And then the how. The very specific how the joint force is commanded to actually achieve these strategic aims.
Exactly. Distilling that why and how.
Okay, so let's unpack this. It seems pretty clear where we have to start. All these documents, they really converge on one central point, don't they? The biggest strategic challenge, setting the pace for everything else.
Absolutely. The People's Republic of China.
Yeah.
The 2022 National Defense Strategy, it doesn't mince words. It explicitly names the People's Republic of China as the Department of Defense's pacing challenge.
A pacing challenge means more than just, like, they have a big army, right?
Oh, much more. It goes way beyond just military modernization. The strategy's assessment is that China possesses both the intent to fundamentally reshape the international order.
The desire to change the rules.
Precisely. And importantly, it also has the rapidly growing power, economic, diplomatic, military, technological power to actually achieve that reshaping across multiple domains, too.
And, that intent, it seems like it's really starting to sink in with the American public. That's a big factor, isn't it? Shaping consensus for foreign policy.
It is, and that study, Dealing with the Dragon, it really highlights this shift. American public perception has moved dramatically towards seeing China as a rival.
Yeah, the numbers were pretty stark.
They were. Nearly 2/3 of Americans, according to their data, view China unfavorably and specifically see them as a rival, not just a competitor, a rival.
But here's where it gets complicated, especially for alliances. That view isn't necessarily shared across the Atlantic, is it?
No, and that's fascinating. That's where the transatlantic challenge part of that study's title comes in. It pointed out that while Europeans had this, overwhelming negative agreement about the U.S. under the previous administration.
Right, there was a lot of unity there.
Yeah, but that consensus just kind of evaporates when the topic turns to China. Europe is really quite divided on how to approach Beijing.
And that division, it seems to follow economic lines a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at the big players in the European Union, like Germany and France.
Exactly. The study makes it clear that the whole discussion in the EU is heavily shaped by Germany and France, and even they aren't completely aligned. China specialists in both countries, the report notes, they expressed real discomfort with let's say, the aggressive tactics of the Trump administration's trade war, even if, deep down, they shared many of the same underlying concerns about China's trade practices, intellectual property theft, things like that.
So they agree on the problem, maybe, but not the solution.
Pretty much. And that discomfort leads to a very different strategic preference in Europe compared to the U.S. The Europeans generally prefer to handle these commercial issues, market access, subsidies, IP, multilaterally.
Through the World Trade Organization.
That's their preferred venue, yeah. A strengthened World Trade Organization, according to the Berlin report from that study. This is really different from the direction things have taken in the U.S., where this ideal of economic decoupling from China has gained a lot of steam.
Right. This idea of just separating the economies.
Yeah. And the European Union is, deeply reluctant to go down that road, mainly because their economic interests are so deeply intertwined with China's.
Okay, but that raises a really critical question, doesn't it? If the U.S. sees China as this major rival needing, integrated deterrence across every area, but key allies like Germany and France are focused more on economic engagement and using the WTO, how does that affect a unified approach? Does it make the whole transatlantic strategy less coherent, less feasible?
It absolutely creates friction. It limits the options politically for cooperation. And you see this really clearly in the area of technology competition.
Oh, yeah.
Europeans, especially the Germans, they look at China's big industrial policy push, Made in China 2025.
The plan to dominate high-tech manufacturing.
Exactly. And they see it as a direct threat to their own economic models. They feel it's eroding the technological advantages that Europe has relied on for, well, for a long time.
And that dealing with the Dragon study was specific about the tech sectors causing the most concern, wasn't it?
Very specific. It flagged 4 areas as critical immediate concerns where China is either catching up fast or even trying to establish global dominance. We're talking artificial intelligence, 5G wideband networks, semiconductors, and quantum technologies.
All the cutting-edge stuff.
All the foundational technologies for the future economy and security. And you can see this difference in approach playing out in things like investment screening.
How so?
Well, Europe set up a new investment screening framework back in 2019, but the study described it mainly as a coordination and cooperation tool. It helps member states share information about potentially sensitive foreign investments.
Okay.
But it doesn't actually give the European Union itself the power to block those investments.
So it's more about information sharing than direct intervention.
Right. Now, compare that to the American system, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or CFIUS. That body is much more powerful. It's stringent. Its decisions are binding. And it absolutely can block or even reverse deals if they're seen as a national security risk.
So the tools themselves reflect a different mindset. A German economic minister might see a Chinese investment as just business,
While their American counterpart, maybe the national security advisor, sees the exact same investment as a potential security threat, a way for China to gain technological leverage or military advantage. It's a fundamentally different lens.
And does this divergence also show up in how they view Chinese influence operations?
It does. The Berlin Report section of that study identifies the main goal of China's influence operations differently than, say, Russia's. For Beijing, the primary purpose is controlling the international story about China. They call it Great External Propaganda, or Dawaisuan.
Great external propaganda. So if the focus isn't mainly on messing with elections, like the accusations often leveled against Moscow, what is the goal of Dawaisuan?
The focus seems to be on what the report calls elite capture.
Elite capture. What's that involve?
It involves quite sophisticated efforts to, well, co-opt influential foreigners. Think academics, journalists, politicians, media figures, people who shape public opinion and policy debates.
Okay. And what's the strategy?
It seems to be twofold. First, encourage these elites to promote views that are friendly to China's interests. And second, maybe more subtly, to get foreign actors to censor themselves.
Self-censorship. How did that work?
Well, the implication is, if you publicly criticize China on sensitive issues, you risk being labeled unfriendly. And that could lead to various forms of pressure, maybe intimidation, or even economic consequences, losing access to the Chinese market, for instance.
So it's a longer game. Less about sowing chaos now, like maybe Moscow's approach, and more about shaping the narrative and neutralizing criticism later to protect their economic goals.
That seems to be the assessment, yes. It's aimed at softening the global security response over the long term.
Does that mean that countries with really strong economic ties, like Germany with its export focus, or countries with influential universities, might be more vulnerable to this kind of influence than, say, a country perhaps more focused purely on security?
That's exactly what the study implies. The structure of influence in these economically powerful nations, their reliance on market access, can make them more susceptible to these pressures towards self-censorship. It's a very sophisticated form of narrative control, much harder to counter than, say, a straightforward cyber attack on election systems. It forces Western countries to rethink their counter-influence strategies entirely.
Okay, so that really sets the stage. We have this primary competitor, China. We have complex dynamics within our key alliances, intense tech competition. But strategy doesn't happen in a vacuum, does it? The whole world is changing underneath our feet.
Exactly.
Let's pivot now to those huge structural forces that are shaping the entire environment. This is where that National Intelligence Council report, Global Trends 2040, comes in.
Right. You simply cannot understand defense strategy without grasping the context it operates in. And Global Trends 2040, well, it paints a really turbulent picture for the next couple of decades.
Turbulent, how?
It highlights these massive shared global challenges, things like climate change, financial crises, pandemics, major technology disruptions. The report suggests these are likely to hit us more often and more intensely.
Okay.
And here's a critical point. Many of these challenges, they don't have a clear human bad guy behind them. There's no single perpetrator you can point to.
Which makes traditional deterrence difficult, right? If you can't identify an adversary to hold accountable.
Precisely. Traditional deterrence models struggle when there isn't a clear agent causing the harm. Think about a massive climate event or a runaway AI. Who do you deter?
Yeah, that's a fundamental shift. And the report talks about this paradox, too. Fragmentation.
Yes. Fragmentation. It's a key dynamic. On the one hand, we're more connected than ever before. Think about the Internet of Things. They project something like 64 billion connected devices by 2025. Astonishing number.
Hyperconnectivity.
But paradoxically, all this connectivity seems to be driving us further apart. It's splitting people into these echo chambers, these information silos, based on their existing beliefs.
So more connection leads to more division.
In many ways, yes. It's more than just arguments on social media. It's a strategic issue. Connectivity boosts efficiency in trade, sure. But when it fragments along national, cultural, or political lines, it just reinforces biases within closed groups. This fuels political polarization, which makes it harder for governments to build the consensus needed for big, long-term strategic efforts.
And beneath this political fragmentation, there are even deeper shifts happening. Demographics, for instance.
Huge shifts. The major trend identified in Global Trends 2040 is the aging world. It's not just developed countries anymore. By 2040, most developed economies and even major emerging ones, think Russia, Japan, China, a lot of Europe, they'll see their populations peak and actually start to shrink.
Wow. Shrinking populations in places like China.
Yes, and this has direct national security implications, not just economic ones.
Yeah.
The most immediate effect is a rising old age dependency ratio.
Meaning more retirees relative to workers.
Exactly. As the share of the population over 65 grows compared to the working age population, it puts a massive drag on economic growth. And it forces governments to divert huge sums of money to pensions and health care. In many advanced economies, they project the over 65 group could be close to 25% of the total population by 2040.
A quarter of the population. If a country is spending that much energy and money just supporting its seniors, how does that impact its ability to invest in, say, advanced military tech needed for that integrated deterrence we talked about against China?
It fundamentally constrains their choices. It limits the resources available for long-term strategic competition. It becomes a massive internal pressure competing with external defense needs.
But the demographic picture isn't uniform globally, is it?
Not at all. You have the complete opposite trend happening elsewhere. Sub-Saharan Africa is the big outlier. It's projected to account for something like 2/3 of all global population growth over the coming decades. Its population could nearly double by 2050.
Doubling by 2050? That's incredible growth.
It is. But that rapid youthful growth creates immense pressure on local governments, on infrastructure, schools, hospitals. It can fuel regional instability, which often ends up requiring international intervention, whether military or humanitarian.
So aging in some places, massive youth booms in others, and then layered on top of all that is environmental instability.
Absolutely central. Climate change isn't just an environmental issue anymore. The report frames it as a primary security threat. It cites the U.S. National Climate Assessment, finding that global warming is probably going to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius within the next 20 years.
Even if emissions stop tomorrow.
Even if emissions went to net zero immediately, that much warming is likely already locked in.
And the impacts are already being felt strategically.
Severely, especially in the Arctic. Temperatures there are warming about 3 times faster than the global average.
3 times faster?
Yeah. And as the ice melts, it opens up new sea routes, gives access to previously unreachable natural resources, and this is directly fueling competition between major powers. You see Russia building more icebreakers to assert control.
And even countries without Arctic coastlines are getting involved.
Right. China, India, they're explicitly looking for access to these shorter shipping routes and potential resources. It's a new arena for geopolitical maneuvering.
And climate change isn't happening in isolation. It intersects with other environmental problems.
It does. Land degradation, overuse of water resources, pollution, they all combine with climate change to erode human security. And the impact falls disproportionately on the developing world, making already fragile situations worse.
We're also seeing shifts in global health threats, aren't we? It's not just about pandemics anymore.
That's a really important point from the report. Historically, security planning focused a lot on preparing for communicable diseases like the flu. But the reality now is a major shift towards non-communicable diseases.
Like diabetes, cancer.
Exactly. Diabetes, cancer, chronic respiratory problems. Health experts cited in the report project that by 2040, these could account for up to 80% of deaths even in low-income countries.
80%.
Yeah. And most of these countries just don't have the health systems built to handle this chronic disease burden. It creates this constant strain on governance and makes populations more vulnerable to other shocks and instability.
And driving and complicating all of this is the relentless pace of technology.
Relentless is the right word. Global Trends 2040 warns that the pace and reach of tech development are likely to just keep accelerating. It's transforming how we live, what we can do, but it's also creating brand new tensions and vulnerabilities.
And we keep coming back to those same key areas.
Artificial intelligence, 5G, semiconductors, quantum tech. The race for dominance in these core technologies is completely intertwined with future military power and economic prosperity. And think about the impact on jobs.
Automate.
Huge disruption. The report estimates automation could eliminate around 9% of current jobs and radically change maybe a third of all jobs within the next 15 to 20 years. That level of economic upheaval is practically guaranteed to fuel more political and social fragmentation.
Which leads right back to the problem of governing in this environment. The report talks about a growing mismatch between public demands and government capabilities.
Yeah, fueled by this global mood of rising pessimism and, frankly, plummeting trust in institutions.
Is there data on that trust gap?
There is, and it's striking. The report cites surveys showing the gap in trust between the informed public, usually wealthier, more educated people, and the mass public has widened dramatically. It went from about 5 percentage points in 2012 to a huge 16 percentage points by 2021.
16 points. That's massive.
It is. And when a large part of the population fundamentally doesn't trust its own government or institutions, it severely weakens the state's ability to mobilize society for, a long, expensive, complex strategic competition like the one envisioned with China.
And other factors are amplifying this volatility.
Definitely. Urbanization, especially in the developing world, concentrates large populations together, often sharing grievances. Combine that with the spread of communication tech, smartphones, social media that allows people to organize protests, civil disobedience, or even violence incredibly quickly. It creates a very unstable political environment prone to conflict, often within states rather than just between them.
So governments are caught in this bind. High debt, aging populations in the West demanding social spending, but also needing to deal with these massive global challenges like climate change and pandemics and compete strategically.
Exactly. That's the incredibly constrained, volatile operating environment that the military has to navigate.
Okay, that perfectly sets up the next part of our deep dive. If the world is this fragmented, this contested, this volatile, how is the U.S. defense structure actually set up to handle it? How do you address a high-end challenge like China while also dealing with non-state actors or these non-agent threats like climate disasters or cyber attacks? We need to turn to the 2022 National Defense Strategy and that foundational doctrine, Joint Publication 1, Volume 2.
Right. The 2022 National Defense Strategy really tries to answer that by laying out 4 core priorities for the Department of Defense. These aren't just random goals. They're strategic choices based directly on that threat landscape we just discussed.
Let's walk through them. How are they prioritized?
Okay, first priority, defending the homeland. And importantly, it specifically says this is paced to the growing multi-domain threat from the People's Republic of China.
So China is the benchmark even for homeland defense.
Yes. Second priority, deterring strategic attacks against the United States, but also against our allies and partners. Third priority, and this is where the resource allocation really gets focused, is deterring aggression. But here's the key phrase. While prioritizing the China challenge in the Indo-Pacific region, then the Russia challenge in Europe.
So it codifies that China-first approach while still acknowledging Russia is a major immediate threat.
Exactly. It sets the strategic priority, but recognizes the acute danger from Russia. And finally, the fourth priority is building a resilient joint force and defense ecosystem. That word resilient points towards needing to adapt to all this complexity we've been talking about.
And the big concept tying this all together is integrated deterrence. We hear that phrase a lot. What does it actually mean in practice?
It's definitely more than just a buzzword. The strategy defines it pretty clearly. It means drawing on tailored combinations of capabilities across the board.
What?
Conventional forces, cyber capabilities, space assets, information operations, plus the unique deterrent effect of nuclear weapons. It's about using everything across all domains and across the whole spectrum of conflict, from peacetime competition right up to high-intensity warfare.
The goal being to make it too complicated, Too costly for an adversary to act.
Exactly, to complicate their entire decision-making process, to convince them that aggression at any level just isn't worth the risks.
Now, the nuclear piece is obviously critical, especially with Russia. How does the strategy address that?
The 2022 Nuclear Posture Review tackles that head-on. It highlights Russia's invasion of Ukraine, explicitly noting it happened under what it calls a nuclear shadow.
Meaning Russia used its nuclear arsenal as cover.
The review argues that Russia sees its nuclear weapons as a shield that allows it to wage conventional aggression against its neighbors without fear of direct, large-scale intervention.
That certainly raises the stakes for escalation.
Immensely. And you see the potential for escalation even in the conventional realm when you look at the 2022 Missile Defense Review.
What does that review highlight?
It details just how much the air and missile threat has evolved. It notes that Russia, in Ukraine, has used thousands of missiles, air-launched, land-launched, sea-launched cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, even advanced hypersonic weapons.
Thousands.
The sheer volume, the mix of types, the integration, it demands a really agile and adaptable defense.
And it's not just state actors using missiles anymore, is it?
No, that's a growing problem.
Yeah.
The Missile Defense Review points to the increasing danger from non-state groups using more sophisticated drones, rockets, and missiles. These are often cheaper, easier to get, harder to attribute.
Making them ideal for proxy warfare or deniable attacks.
Exactly. It's a huge challenge for regional defense, requiring constant innovation just to keep pace with the threat.
So to protect the U.S. homeland itself against these kinds of strategic missile threats, particularly thinking about countries like North Korea, what's the plan?
The focus there is on improving the ground-based mid-course defense system, specifically developing the Next Generation Interceptor, or NGI. The idea is for the NGI to augment and maybe eventually replace the current ground-based interceptors. It's about ensuring that our defense against long-range ballistic missiles stays reliable and capable as potential adversaries improve their own offensive systems.
Okay. Strategy, threats, priorities. Now let's get down to the real nuts and bolts. How does the military actually organize itself to execute all this? Whether it's a major war or disaster relief, it all comes down to command and control, right?
Absolutely. And that's where Joint Publication 1, Volume 2 comes in. It lays out the fundamentals of the command structure. It provides the basic language, the defined relationships that govern how the joint force operates.
It's the rule book for who's in charge of what.
Essentially, yes. And it defines 4 absolutely critical command relationships or authorities. Understanding the precise difference between these is vital because they dictate responsibility and capability.
Okay, let's break them down. Start at the very top. Combatant Command. Usually hear it called COCOM.
Right. Combatant Command, or COCOM, is the highest level. It's the authority granted by law to a combatant commander, like the head of United States Indo-Pacific Command or European Command. It involves organizing forces, assigning tasks, setting objectives, basically giving authoritative direction over all aspects of military operations and joint training needed for the mission in their assigned area.
And the key thing is it cannot be delegated down.
Correct. Combatant command rests solely with the combatant commander. It cannot be passed down to subordinates. It's established in law.
Okay, so below combatant command, what's next? Operational control.
OPCUN.
Yes, operational control, or OPCUN. This is the authority to perform the command functions needed to accomplish the mission. Things like assigning specific tasks to forces, directing movement, designating objectives.
And how is that different from combatant command? The critical difference is that operational control can be delegated. The combatant commander can grant operational control to a subordinate joint force commander. For instance, in a large operation, the combatant commander might delegate a piece-on of all the air assets to a joint force air component commander. This allows for centralized planning but decentralized execution of the air campaign.
Got it. So combatant command is overall authority. Operational control is mission-specific authority that can be delegated. What about the next level down? Tactical control. TACON.
Tactical control, or TACON, is even more limited. It's the authority for detailed direction and control of movements and maneuvers within a specific operational area, just enough to accomplish assigned tasks or missions.
So very specific localized control.
Exactly. This is the authority that's routinely delegated down the chain to component commanders or task force leaders. Think about it like this. The combatant commander holds COCOM for the whole theater. They might delegate OPCON for a specific campaign to a joint force commander. That joint force commander might then delegate TACON of a specific naval group conducting anti-submarine warfare to the commander of that group. It allows for immediate control of actions on the ground, At sea or in the air.
Combatant command, operational control, tactical control. Okay, there's one more relationship mentioned. Support. How does that fit in? It's not really control, is it?
No, support is different. It's a command relationship, not an authority level in the same way. It's established by a common superior commander when one unit needs to help another aid, protect, complement, or sustain them.
Like logistics or intelligence sharing.
Precisely. It's essential for making sure everything works together. The key thing is the supported commander, the one receiving the help, directs the general outcome they need. But the supporting commander, the one giving the help, decides how they will provide that support, the specific methods and means. It ensures resources like, say, aerial refueling or medical evacuation get where they need to go efficiently without the supporting unit having to take over the whole mission.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, within this whole structure, where does the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff fit? It's a role people often misunderstand. Are they in the command chain?
That's a common point of confusion. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is the principal military advisor. They advise the president, the National Security Council, the Homeland Security Council, and the Secretary of Defense.
Advisor, not commander.
Critically, yes. The chairman does not exercise command authority over combat forces. They act as the communication link, transmitting orders from the president or the Secretary of Defense to the combatant commanders, and they oversee the activities of those commanders. But they are not in the direct chain of command running from the president to the forces in the field. This separation is fundamental to civilian control of the military in the U.S. system.
Right. Okay, so we have these established commands. But what happens when something unexpected comes up? A crisis, a specific contingency that doesn't neatly fit into the existing structure, like a sudden regional conflict or a huge natural disaster requiring military help.
That's where the concept of a Joint Task Force, or JTF, comes in. Joint Publication 1, Volume 2 provides for establishing these.
And what makes a joint task force different from a permanent command like Indo-PACOM?
The key difference is that a Joint Task Force is established for a finite mission. It has a specific operational level objective, and it doesn't necessarily need centralized control over all logistics like a permanent command might.
So it's temporary.
Exactly. It can be set up by the Secretary of Defense, a combatant commander, or even a subordinate unified commander. And once that specific mission is done, maybe it's evacuating civilians from a war zone, or conducting a specific counterterrorism operation, or leading disaster relief, the authority that established the Joint Task Force dissolves it.
Which makes it agile, flexible, potentially well-suited for some of those unpredictable challenges from Global Trends 2040, like a pandemic response or earthquake relief.
Precisely. Its temporary and mission-focused nature makes it ideal for rapid, tailored responses.
Now, these operations almost always involve forces from different branches, Army, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, Marines. How does the doctrine ensure they all work together effectively under one commander?
That's the purpose of functional component commands. When you have forces from 2 or more military departments operating in the same area, or when you need to manage a specific function across the joint force, you establish these functional commands.
Like an air component command or a land component command?
Exactly. You might have a joint force land component commander, a joint force air component commander, a joint force maritime component commander, maybe even a special operations component commander. This structure puts a single commander in charge of integrating all the capabilities within that specific function, land, air, sea, special ops, allowing the overall joint force commander to effectively wield the combined power of all the services simultaneously.
Okay, so we've really covered the whole spectrum here. From the big strategic picture of the China challenge, the fragmenting world described in Global Trends, all the way down to the specific tools and structures like integrated deterrence and these core command relationships from Joint Publication 1, Volume 2.
And if there's one overriding message coming out of the 2022 National Defense Strategy, it's the need for adaptability. The entire defense ecosystem, the joint force itself, has to be resilient. It needs to constantly adapt to threats that range from that high-end competition with China all the way to the systemic effects of climate change or technological disruption. Those big structural forces from Global Trends 2040, they aren't side issues anymore. They are central factors the military has to plan for and operate within.
Right, so we end up with this very clearly defined, almost hierarchical doctrine for command control, combatant command, operational control, tactical control, support. It seems designed for clarity and order.
It is. It provides clear lines of authority and responsibility.
But then we look back at Global Trends 2040, and it suggests futures like competitive coexistence, where we're economically linked but politically rivals, or a world adrift, marked by stagnation and paralysis.
Yeah, futures where conflict might be constant but often ambiguous, non-kinetic. Fought in cyberspace, in the information space, through economic coercion.
Threats that move incredibly fast, blurring boundaries. Not like lining up tanks.
Exactly. Threats moving at the speed of light, not the speed of a carrier strike group.
So here's the final thought, the provocative question maybe, for you listening. If the future threat environment is so fluid, so fast, often non-kinetic and ambiguous, are these traditional, clearly delineated command relationships, designed perhaps for a different era of warfare, still the best way to manage? When a challenge is a coordinated cyber attack flashing across the globe, or a pandemic spreading silently, which level of command authority, that top-level combatant command, the mission-focused operational control, or the immediate tactical control, which becomes the most critical? How does this structure maintain coherence when the threat itself is so fast and maybe doesn't respect geographic boundaries or functional lanes?